Hey guys, check it out. December 8th in New York City, the SoHo Forum is hosting a debate on the resolution. While vaccine mandates are an infringement on freedom, some are justified due to their big payoff in lives saved. For the affirmative will be George Mason law professor Ela Soman, and for the negative, our friend Angela McArdle, chair of the Libertarian Party of Los Angeles County and declared candidate for national chair of the Libertarian Party. The live debate will be at the Sheen Center. And of course, yes, they do have the vaccine restrictions at the Sheen Center, but they do not at Gene Epstein's apartment. And they're going to have a live viewing party at Gene's house. So people who oppose the mandates can watch the debate about the mandates. And so find out everything you need to know all about it at the SoHoForum.org. That's this December the 8th in New York. All right, y'all, welcome to the Scott Horton Show. I'm the director of the Libertarian Institute, editorial director of antiwar.com, author of the book Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, and the brand new Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism. And I've recorded more than 5,500 interviews since 2003, almost all on foreign policy, and all available for you at scotthorton.org. You can sign up for the podcast feed there. And the full interview archive is also available at youtube.com/Scott Horton Show. All right, y'all. Introducing Patricia Hynes. She is a retired environmental engineer and professor of environmental health. And one of her books is The Recurring Silent Spring. And she's got this piece out called The Burn Pits at Truth Dig. It's from 2017. You can read about that. But our friend Sam Husseini put out a press release about some news along the lines. Burn pits, federal government finally helping vets suffering from military pollution. Well, it's 2021. Better late than never. Welcome to the show, Patricia. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Thank you. And thanks for this opportunity.
Really happy to have you here. So this is such an important issue. Can you tell us just how much credit do they deserve, even at this late date? Are they really going to get it done now and trying to take care of these guys?
It is a late date. This has been since 1990 with the first Gulf War, and then with all of our wars in the Middle East and Southwest Asia since then. But shall I go back and just describe what these burn pits are?
Absolutely.
And the waste, solid and toxic waste that goes into them. I do want to give credit to the book, The Burn Pits, The Poisoning of American Soldiers by Joseph Hickman. He's a retired Marine and also put some time in the Army. And
he was the great whistleblower on the CIA murders at Guantanamo Bay in 2006, by the way, too.
He was. Joseph Hickman.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And in fact, when people read about that, it's the other Scott Horton, not me, but the law professor from Columbia who wrote all this about Hickman in Harper's, and he wrote a whole other book about that as well.
Well, that's great. And I'll just add that Hickman himself, from his exposures in war, he himself has some, you might call them disabilities, but I mean, obviously did not impede his writing a very informative book, and one which ultimately has some consequence. But let's first of all talk about what are in these pits. These were open fire pits operated on more than 230 U.S. military bases during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, and then all of the places where the bases in neighboring countries where the U.S. military had posted soldiers. Now, every kind of waste, from plastics, batteries, old ordnance, asbestos, pesticide containers, and tires, to biomedical, chemical, and nuclear waste, dead animals, human waste, body parts, and corpses, all of it was incinerated in these pits. Did I mention? Yes, there were 230 of them. And apparently, the estimate is that 3.5 million of U.S. soldiers on those bases were exposed. Now, they say the waste was incinerated, but that's actually misleading. It suggests an enclosed burning facility with pollution controls. But these, they were barbaric burn pits. The thing is, they were dug on military bases in the midst of where these soldiers lived. So their housing, their workplace, their dining facilities, and consequently, there was a ton of waste, 10 tons of waste per soldier on base. And these were burned every day, all day, and blackening the air, but also the coating, clothing, bed, desks, dining halls, etc., with ash. And the ash would have contained hundreds of toxins and carcinogens.
Right.
So, of course, they were in violation of anything waste disposal facility we would build here, except that I have read that there were waste pits on U.S. military bases here in the
Yeah,
United
don't
States.
underestimate them.
That's right.
Well, I'll tell you what,
Yeah.
I think it's a very important distinction you make there about incineration, that maybe it does call to mind like a cremation chamber or something, with these ultra hot gas jets completely obliterating everything. But as you're
Yes.
saying here, they're just dousing this stuff with diesel fuel and burning it. In other words,
Right.
it's very incomplete burning,
Very
and
incomplete
much of it is being
combustion.
turned to smoke rather than light and heat and water vapor.
Yeah. So you would expect, wouldn't you, that the effects that the VA thus far, and I want to come back to the VA and its role in this, but thus far they've identified 3 respiratory illnesses that they will give disability for: asthma, rhinitis, and sinusitis for veterans who've been in both of those wars, and also on the 230 military bases since 1990. But I want to say, because you brought this up earlier, well, this has been, what, 30 years since these soldiers were on those bases? I mean, the ones who were there first. And that's about the same amount of time that it took the government to do something about Agent Orange exposure. And in fact, the VA dragged its feet. So did so did the executive department, executive office of the United States. And it was not until, I'm talking Agent Orange, till 1991, when U.S. congressionals insisted, Kerry was one of them, he had been a veteran of that war, insisted that there be legislation because the rest of the government was foot dragging. And so in 1991, the Agent Orange Congressional Act was passed. Now, that is what we need for the burn pits and the exposures. And essentially, it required that every 2 years since that was passed, there be, well, first of all, every year there be continuing research done on the health effects of those soldiers exposed to Agent Orange, and that the reports come out every 2 years. They also presumed that every soldier on base in Vietnam was exposed to Agent Orange. And I'm telling this so that this is the model that we should have for the burn pits exposure, that everyone on base was presumed exposed, that there be ongoing research, and that once there is a strong enough correlation, statistical correlation between the health effects and those who were in Vietnam, that those soldiers with those health effects get both the health care they should and disability payments as well. Well, in the case of the burn pits, thus far, number one, you have to have a registry, and only 1 in 12 who were in since 1990 exposed on bases to burn pits have registered. But it is presumed, as I mentioned earlier, that 3.5 million have been exposed. And so in addition to the 3, rhinitis, sinusitis, and asthma, it is through reports of soldiers themselves thought that there are very rare cancers, and one is a cancer of the brain, that it is suspected that President Biden's son, Bo, who served some time at a base in Iraq, I believe it was, that he was exposed and he died of a rare brain cancer that is apparently linked with these burn pits, not yet by the VA, but by others who have done studies. I do want to add that there were some bases that were much more perilous than others, and that's because they were built on the remnants of Iraqi military bases that had been bombed by the US, flattened, by our airstrikes. Now, a handful of these bases, at least 5, had contained stockpiles of old chemical warfare weapons, and among them the nerve agent sarin and the blistering agent mustard gas. So it is thought that soldiers who served at that handful of bases that we bombed with immense negligence, knowing that soldiers were nearby, that it is they who are suspected of having been exposed, to these nerve agents. And among the effects would be this rare brain cancer. And apparently, Biden's son was stationed at one of these bases. So essentially, it is a replication of the Vietnam War. And I do want to add that our country, with all of its 800 military bases across the world, as well as hundreds in this country. But in the other countries, let's just say Japan, the Philippines, our agreements with those countries is that if we close a base, if we leave, we do not have to clean them up. We leave our waste there and the country cleans it up. So I do want to make.
Don't worry, they're not closing them, so it won't be an issue. They'll just keep polluting.
They did in the Philippines.
Yeah,
and that's where all the and they did in Vietnam, and this is they left their waste.
Afghanistan.
Oh, right, Afghanistan too. I mean, there were these same burn pits there. Yep. We left our weapons, but we also left our waste.
Hang on just one second. Hey, y'all, check out thehempspot.com. Did you know? Pot's legal everywhere now. Well, see, it's the Delta 8 loophole. The law says Delta 9 is a crime, so this new isomer is just fine. And thehempspot.com has got you covered. They have all kinds of flavors of bud and gummies and all those things. Use coupon code Horton and get 15% off. Free shipping on any order over $90. Drink less, smoke more pot. Get your Delta 8 cannabis at thehempspot.com, but spell the THC.
Hey guys, Scott Horton here for Mike Swanson's great book, The War State. It's about the rise of the military-industrial complex and the power elite after World War II, during the administrations of Harry Truman, Dwight Eisenhower, and Jack Kennedy. It's a very enlightening take on this definitive era on America's road to world empire. The War State by Mike Swanson. Find it in the right-hand margin at scotthorton.org.
Some of y'all have a problem. You've got chickens, but you don't want to stand around throwing food at them all day because of all the important stuff you have to do. Well, the solution to that is to get the free-range feeder from freerangefeeder.com. The all-stainless steel free-range feeder has been developed to satisfy the needs of the poultry, chicken hobbyist, and the homesteader. The convertible design allows for 4 different mounting methods. Go to freerangefeeder.com/Scott or use promo code Scott to get 10% off and get the free ebook. Subscribe to their newsletter to immediately receive your free copy of Getting Started with Backyard Chickens. That's freerangefeeder.com/Scott. And Joe Biden, by the way, in an interview with PBS, I'm sorry, was it PBS or NPR? It was NPR. It was one of the two. Said that he knows what you say about Bo, and he knows because he read the burn pits too. Someone finally pointed out to him, hey, there's a chapter in this book about your son. Is that right? Uh-huh.
Oh.
I should have Googled it because I thought I knew it off the top of my head, but I can't remember now if it was NPR or PBS.
Okay, that's where I first came across it, was because I learned that there were these rare brain cancers that were showing up in some of those
So
veterans.
Maybe that's what's making the difference now, is that the president's attention has been drawn to this subject for very personal reasons. So he told the VA, do something about this, please, and they're now doing something about it. Is that the point?
I can believe that. And I've heard him make statements, or I've read, about statements that he's made, which he did not, at the time that I read the burn pits. But he must have read it subsequently and acknowledged, yes, I can believe that there was some fire lit beneath the VA. But the fact is, the VA they say that we need a congressional act in order to do this, cover this more thoroughly, like for Agent Orange. So I'll just quickly run through the various legislation. Yeah, all of a sudden, I'll just add, you're right, there is, it's got traction. It's moving. And so here are some of the bills that have been filed and successfully passed in the House. Representative Raul Ruiz has 3 bills that have passed in the House as part of the defense bill. And the first would be mandatory training for all medical providers working under DOD on health effects of burn pits. So this would be to train medical providers to recognize what are likely impacts and effects, health effects of exposure to the burn pits. The second would require the DOD to include in their budget request to Congress an estimate for the funding of incinerators and waste-to-energy disposal alternatives to the burn pits. And the third would require the DOD and VA to expand the registry to include soldiers who have been on bases in Syria and Egypt. But in addition to that, there's a lot of optimism around 2 other bills, one in the House, one in the Senate, and it's Senator Tester and Representative Tuccaro in the House, who have submitted very similar bills that they feel can easily be reconciled. And they are akin to the Agent Orange Congressional Act of 1991. Number 1, that anyone who has served on these bases in the Middle East and Southwest Asia since 1990 are presumed exposed. So that's 3.5 million veterans. Second, more ongoing
You know what?
research.
You should. I'm sorry. I know it's not your bill, but they should maybe throw Kosovo in there too, right? Camp Bondsteel and all that. I'm sure they do it the same way there. In fact, I think Beau Biden was deployed there before he was deployed to Iraq.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I found
No
my
doubt.
footnote. It was PBS. Judy Woodruff interviewed Biden, and Biden
Okay.
brought up the book. But I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
No, but that's a good point about Kosovo. And right now the focus is on, I know that it's on the Middle East and Southwest Asia, but that there is more ongoing research for illnesses, including respiratory and cancers. See, that is desperately what's needed. And it got aggressively started, as I mentioned, with Agent Orange. And this is what they need to light a fire under these bills and get that research going. Then also, of course, coverage for health effects and disability effects. Once there is a significant correlation between an illness discovered through studying these soldiers and also studying, they'll probably do this research on animals, but there is disability benefits for them. And both of these, the senator and the rep, are very optimistic about reconciling the two and about the passage. So yes, I think your point is good that having a president who now strongly suspects that his son died from exposure to these burn pits, I'm sure that gives some mobility to the likelihood of the passage of these bills. I just want to say, though, on behalf of veterans, now I am a pacifist. There may be exceptions, but not in my lifetime. And at the same time, I feel that our military, which is the greatest polluter in the world, and including climate change, that our military, will train somebody for 3 months and throw them into a war, then bring them home and ignore them. And it's the Gulf War syndrome, for example. I just checked this before our talk. 44% of soldiers who served in the first Gulf War are disabled by Gulf War syndrome. And then you think, what the hell did we do to them there? Well, for one, a lot of pesticide exposure that was on the part of the military. And for another, we bombed. These were old chemical weapons sites very near where the soldiers were based. And so they were exposed to sarin, mustard gas, et cetera. This is after years of research, is the conclusion of what has called this sort of multiple syndrome of effects called the Gulf War syndrome. But we basically bring them home and let them fall apart after the wars that we have sent them to, with 3 months training, and it takes badgering the VA, DOD, and it takes some advocates for these veterans, often they're veterans themselves who are in Congress, for them to get the kind of care that they should be getting the rest of their lives. So it's a negligent, the DOD is not only too big, it is negligent, interested in war, but not in its veterans.
Yeah. Well, and it's always been like that too. It's a real shame. And, I know a guy who was downwind from the Camisea bunker when they detonated it in 1991 with just plain old conventional TNT explosives when they should have used some kind of massive implosion bomb, or better, they should have driven that stuff away in trucks, and instead, these guys got doused with at least burned sarin, which is poisonous enough to cause some real problems for people.
Nerve agent. Yeah, it's a nerve agent. I also
there was a study too in the 90s about anti-sarin pills that were supposed to protect you from sarin, that might have caused some real damage as well.
Yes. Yeah, you've done your homework. I came across that myself, but just online, but not in any of the books that I've read and reviewed. But I think that we are so infected as a country with our image of essentially securing the world through our military. And most of our congressionals have bought into that. So they passed that Defense Act, adding more money to it. So we have a real problem that is not limited to the pollution that we cause across the world. I mean, first of all, the model of power that this country operates with in the world. And at this point, if you read DOD's newsletter, as I do every day, we are preparing for war with China. And this is in the midst of a climate crisis that may undo us, I mean, the entire world, before we get to war with China. But do we have resources enough to plan and operate a war against China when the world is falling apart from climate crisis and our country is falling apart in terms of its own infrastructure and in terms of the violence we perpetrate in the world coming home, as we see in the school shootings that happened yesterday, the record number of guns in the country and the record number of homicides.
Yep.
So it's all of a piece.
That's what happens when your empire falls.
Yes, as it begins to fall apart, which it is doing. Yeah. But what that saying, what goes around comes around, and the violence in this country, or that we experience the most, the highest prevalence of violence, human violence on humans of any developed country in the world. The most people in prison. I mean, all of these are impacts and effects that are organically linked to a heavily militarized country. Yep. But our dilemma is the military is still one of, if not the most popular institution in the country, and that we have both parties are basically have bought into the paradigm of national security through.
Right. Although, you know what, after the last 20 years, they're only the most popular by default. And they're still, everybody else is doing worse than
competition.
Them. But confidence in the Pentagon has really fallen, and probably in the minds of the enlisted men before the rest of us too. But listen, I'm sorry. I know that you got to go, and I actually got to go too. But thank you so much for doing the show today. I really appreciate it. It's such an important subject. And I'm really glad to hear that there's some progress being made here. So appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Scott. I really enjoyed our talk together. You're very informed.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, you guys, that is Patricia Hynes, and you can find this great piece that she wrote back in 2017 at truthdig.com, The Burn Pits.
The Scott Horton Show, Anti-War Radio, can be heard on KPFK 90.7 FM in LA, APSradio.com, antiwar.com, scotthorton.org, and libertarianinstitute.org.